This conference will now be
Preparing a
recorded.
wonderful lunch for us. And the next few weeks, we will be Vivianless at our lunches. So she has a little medical procedure she needs. So we'll wish her well and thank her. And we will miss her as we're eating sandwiches the next couple of weeks. Okay, good. All right. So we are in the midst of, everyone has a sheet. We are in the midst of Sfiras HaOmer. And last time we were focusing, and we concluded with number 4 on our sheet, which was Rav Hirsch. And last time we were focusing on the aspect of the Omer. What does that Omer offering, that barley offering that was brought on the second day of Pesach, what does that represent? And we spoke about how we give our first to God, recognizing that all that we have comes from Him. We always have a special connection, affinity to our first, right? And we present that to God, again, recognizing that it is a gift from Him. And we spoke about, Rav Hirsch spoke about the idea that all of the components are waved before Hashem, right? And that he explained what each of those represent, right? There's our material nourishment represented by the flour, and then it's also mixed with oil. Oil represents our well-being, our physical, material well-being, and incense, right? That is our mental satisfaction with life, because incense is not anything physical, material. It just gives us that positivity, that strength, and all of that we wave before God. Okay, so now as we move to, let me just get my sheet back up here. As we move to source number 5, now besides the bringing of the Omer, as we know, there is a Torah mitzvah to count the days and the weeks from the second day of Pesach until the evening before Shavuot. That's a total of 49 days. Cheryl, the temperature is perfect. How did you know? Thank you. Okay, and that is why. So we need to count these 49 days, and the Torah says Tamimot. We'll soon see complete days, and that is why here at Beth Jacob, even though when it comes to a Shabbos we bring it in early, a Yom Tov we bring it in early. Even when it's a second day Yom Tov, there are some synagogues or some communities where they will wait to daven Mariv, the second day of Yom Tov, until the first day is completely out, until Shabbos time ending. And that way we're not encroaching on that first day at all. But here, right, we do daven a little bit earlier than that and get home in time to have our meal on that second day. But when it comes to Shavuot, there the Mishnah Brura says you should not start early. You should not start. Let's say this year, Shavuot is Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday. So Thursday night we'll daven Mincha at the right time, but then we will not daven Mariv until actually the time when Shabbos ends, and that will be probably about, I'm taking a guess, about 8:30-ish probably, right? That's when we daven Mariv. Why? Because we needed to count 7 weeks Tamimot complete. And therefore we can't encroach, we can't cut short even the last day of those 49 days, which also speaks to an idea that we'll be discussing today about how precious every day and every moment is. And therefore we don't want to, like I said, encroach on that at all. So we count from the evening of the second day of Pesach until the evening before Shavuot. And then we can go into Shavuot after we've completed that last day in a full fashion. Into the 50th day, we'll discuss that also. And these days of the Omer are a time of preparation for Shavuot. right? Which of course parallels the time from when we left Egypt until we stood at Mount Sinai. And according to our sages, we had sunken to the 49th level of impurity. With Yetziat Mitzrayim, we had this explosion upward to get back to ground zero. And then over the course of these 49 days, we readied ourselves to reach that 49th level of purity in order to receive the Torah. So these are days of preparation. Yes, Lev?
We're talking about the first day of Shavuot here or the second day that we were waiting?
The first day.
The first day.
Yeah. The second day we'll bring in Shabbos a little bit earlier, after we have our classic ice cream at the Wolf's first day Shavuot afternoon, right? Okay, so let's see.
You're so full. You don't want second night Shavuot, though.
So let's see the Torah Psukim. Source number 5. That's in Vayikra. Happens to be in this week's Parsha of Omer. Usfartem lachem. You will count for yourselves mimacharat Shabbat, from the day after Shabbat, which means the day after Pesach. Okay, the Gemara works through how the Tzedukim, they insisted that it meant on a Sunday, and all of the safeguards that we have in place to prevent any corruption, any misleading of when the new months are. Now, why would someone want to mislead us about the new month? Right? What's the big deal? Oh, no, the Tzedukim wanted to always try to make sure Shavuot will be on a Sunday, right? And they wanted Pesach, the first day of Pesach, to be on a Shabbat. And that way, they felt that the proper counting would be always on Sunday, right? The only problem the Gemara shows how that can't be the explanation of the Pasuk, right? When it says the day after Shabbat, there are lots of Shabbos. There are lots of Shabbases, usually about 50 plus a year, right? So how could it be telling us the day after Shabbos and not letting us know which Sunday? Rather, the day after Shabbat, here's a reference to the day after Pesach. And then, from the day you bring that waving Omer, right? We discussed with Hirsch last time. The waving is giving it all up to God, so to speak. Sheva Shabbatot Tamimot, 7 weeks Tamimot, complete weeks. Like I said before, that's why we won't daven Marav the night of Shavuot until it's already fully Yom Tov. It's the previous day has been completed. Ad Mimacharat Shabbat, until the day after that 7th week, HaShabbat HaShviyit, the 7th week. Tisperu, you're going to be counting Chamishim Yom, 50 days. V'ikravtem Mincha Chadasha LaHashem. And then you will bring this new offering to God. What is new about the offering on Shavuot? The Shtei Alechem, Steve? What's new about that?
New about the offering on Shavuot.
It's the first time that the new chita, the new wheat, is able to hit the altar. Whereas, right, we mentioned the idea of chadash, the new grains, and that we can only eat once we brought the Omer on the second day of Pesach. That allows us to eat the new grains, but to bring into the Beit HaMikdash, that's wheat. That will only be from the new once we brought on Shavuot the first new offering from that new grain. Similarly, in Devarim, right? That's in Parsha Emor, and that's in Devarim. Shiva Shavuot Tispor Lach. 7 weeks you will count for you. Mehachel Chermesh Bekama. From the time the sickle is first put to the standing grain, Tachel Lispor Shiva Shavuot. You will begin to count these 7 weeks. So what we see that besides the importance of the Omer, that sets in motion the counting that we do. Now, why do we need to verbalize this count. Like the Pasuk said in source number 5, Usfartem lachem. You should count for yourselves. We learn out. It's not a counting that the Beit Din does on behalf of everyone. Every person has their own personal mitzvah obligation to do the counting. Why is this counting so important? So Rambam, if you turn the page over on your source sheet, Rambam, in his classic Moreh Nevuchim, Guide to the Perplexed, writes as follows. Shavuot hu yom matan Torah. Shavuot is the time of the giving of the Torah. Ulahagdil hayohahu hayom hahu, and in order to aggrandize, elevate, raise up this day. So, just 1 second. Rick, I'm just going to hit mute because we're getting some bounce back. Okay, if you want to talk up, Rick, please free to. You just have to unmute yourself. Okay. Ulahagdil, and in order to elevate, aggrandize this day, Nimnu Ayamim, we count the days min hamoed harishon elav, from the first holiday to it. Kamo shemamtin bo hane'eman sheba'ohavav, the same way that someone who is waiting for their beloved, shehu moneh hayom v'gam hashot, that person is counting the days, counting the hours. So too, we are waiting, counting. Pesach was our physical exodus from Egypt, began on the first day of Pesach with the actual exodus, and the physical exodus was completed on the 7th day of Pesach with the splitting of the sea and the demise of the Egyptian army and their power. But that was all the physical exodus from Egypt. And now we move into, make our way towards the spiritual exodus from Egypt, and that was at Mount Sinai. And therefore, V'zoti Sibat, Sfirata Omer, that's the Rambam says, that's the reason for the counting of the Omer, Miyom Tseitenim Mitzrayim, from the day we left Egypt until Matan Torah, Ad Yom Matan Torah, the day of the giving of the Torah, Shehu Haya HaKavanah VaTachlit B'Yitziatam. The purpose of leaving Egypt was not simply to leave Egypt. The purpose of leaving Egypt was to become this nation of the Torah, this nation of God, through the instructions given to us in the Torah that was given to us, that was shared with us at Mount Sinai. This was the very purpose of the exodus from Egypt, as it says, Vavi etchem elai, and I will bring them, I will bring you to you. And therefore, it's not enough to know about it. We need to physically, actually count the days. And this is a concept that we have throughout Judaism that is coined by the Sefer HaChinuch. And he says, Adam nif'al kafi pu'ulotav. A person is acted upon by their actions. Right? So therefore, Judaism is a religion of doing, of action, because we, with our physical bodies, we are affected and acted upon by our actions. And he gives an example. If you have a very, very kind person who's forced to become an executioner, those actions will change that person and become a little less kindly. Take a person who's not so kindly and put him in a position that he has to do acts of kindness, right? So then that person will be changed. There's the famous Stanford prison experiment that took place in 1971, where some students were chosen to be guards and were given authority, and other students were chosen to be the prisoners, and they were stripped and they were deloused and they were given prison uniforms. This was supposed to last. The experiment was supposed to last for 2 weeks, and it lasted for, anybody? 6 days. It lasted for 6 days. And at that point, they had to stop the experiment because of the brutality that the student guards were exhibiting and pushing on to their classmates, and the submission and the mental breakdowns that the prisoners were experiencing. And that's the idea of Adam Nival Kafi Pulosav. That was used to show how in a totalitarian regime, people can be pushed into positions, and that can then very quickly become their own positions. And that was, I'll keep this if you don't mind. Shirayim, right? Shirayim at the Rebbe's Tish.
Yeah. He'll refill it for you? I don't know.
Okay, so a person is acted upon by their actions, and therefore it's not enough that we know that we are counting and making our way towards Shavuot. We need to daily go through the act of counting each day as we make our way there.
Good.
Okay.
For a moment.
Okay. I'll take what I can get.
You have to understand that a lot of that was because of the standard admission process. You have to screen people for cruelty or submission.
Okay. The Sefer HaChinuch that I mentioned before, the Sefer HaChinuch is a book written by a father, right, for his explaining, going through all of the 613 mitzvot. He explains each of those mitzvot, and that's what I introduced before, the concept of his, which is Adam Nifal Kafi Pulotav. This is number 306, as you see on your sheet, of the 613. Just about the midway point. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, 612. Okay, he says the reason that we count from the bringing of the Omer, right? We count, right? All right, let's say today or last night, today we counted Esrim V'Shmona Yom. We counted 28 days, which is the 28th day from the time that we brought the Omer. And we know that typically in the example that he gave, that the Rambam gave, that a person is pining and waiting for the return of their beloved, right? So therefore, they're not counting, oh, it's 10 days since you left, right? If they're away for 2 weeks, they say, oh, 4 more days until you come, right? Counting the days, counting the hours, you're counting until the end point. So he asked, the reason we count from the bringing of the Omer, so many days have passed in our counting, rather than counting how many days remain, shows our great desire to reach the time of Shavuot. Here's his approach, right? That shows our great desire to get to Shavuot. How does it show that? Therefore, he says, we do not want to mention at the beginning of our counting such a large number of days that remain until we reach the offering of the Shtei HaLechem, the 2 loaves on Shavuot. If we'll start and say 49 more days, no one's going to come to Marv anymore. It's going to be too depressing, right? To hear how many days is it to Marv. We're having enough problems getting a minyan. I don't want to make it harder, right? Harder on the rabbi, harder on anyone else over here, right? So we don't want to start off with how many days it is. That would be, that will cause us to feel depressed. We don't want to mention beginning such a large number of days that remain. And therefore, that's why we start off with how many days in we are. If that's the case, he says, well, once you reach the midway point, so what maybe we should then transition to how many days left. If the whole concern is it'll be depressing to think how many more days, okay, at a certain point, let's transition to 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Let's count our way down. And he said we should not find it difficult to understand that once we have passed halfway through the 7 weeks, we do not count down the few days remaining, as one should not change the nature of the counting in the middle. So he says, once we started counting a certain way, we're going to continue counting in that same pattern. So that's his approach. We'll see another approach soon, Dov. That's his approach. Yes, Dov?
I think it was better to.
So we'll come to another approach first, and then we'll take the comments coming in. Okay. So now that's one question. Why do we start counting from there instead of counting down? Another question is we're counting from Pesach until Shavuot. So why do we start counting? Why do we begin counting the second paragraph from the day after Pesach and not from the first day itself? Why don't we count from Pesach to Shavuot? Why are we starting on the second day? Now here, outside of Israel, that's the second day of Yom Tov. In Israel, that's Chol HaMoed. It's already the intermediary days. So why are we starting there? The answer is, he says, that the first day is entirely dedicated to remembering the great miracle of the Exodus from Egypt, which is a sign and evidence of the fact that God created the world and of the existence of divine providence. Okay? Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus, right? We have so many times that we say at Kiddush, on Friday night, we have Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit, as a way of remembering creation, and Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim, and the Exodus from Egypt. The Exodus from Egypt lays down the foundations of Judaism. God created the world. Great. That's a foundation of Judaism. But God could have created the world, as many people would say, and then is off and running with other things. But he's not all that concerned about what goes on over here in this world. Certainly not concerned what goes on in little Yisroel Ciner's life and worries and concerns, right? He's not involved in that. Comes Yetziat Mitzrayim and lets us know that God is intimately involved, not just in what goes on a national scale, but even on a personal, individual scale. God introduces himself, right? And we're going to do a short series called The Crash Course, right? And the first one is about the existence of God. And we'll mention over there the idea that God introduces himself at Mount Sinai, what we're counting towards now, the holiday of Shavuot, Mount Sinai. God does not say, I'm the God who created the world. I'm the God who took you out from Egypt. You experienced that. And therefore, A, it's personal, and B, you see that I'm involved in the world. Mi beit avadim. From a bayit, from the house of bondage. Why do we refer to it as a beit avadim? Bayit, house, is personal. So God is involved in this world, not just on the national scale, but on the personal scale, on the each and every house. Let's finish the paragraph and I'll give you the floor, Janet, right? And therefore, it is sign and evidence of the fact that God created the world and of the existence of divine providence. So we call hashgacha pratit. Hashgacha, providence, or supervision, involvement, pratit. Personalized, individualized. We may not mix something else into that happiness. So if we were to start counting from that day, then it would detract from the power, the importance, the focus of that day. So we do not want to be ma'arev. We don't want to mix something else into that happiness. There's a concept, ein ma'arvim simcha b'simcha. We don't want to mix one simcha in with another simcha, one cause of celebration, of rejoicing with another, and mention a different idea with it. As such, the counting begins from the second day. Yes, Janet.
It seems like that's a little jumping the gun. It seems like the splitting of the sea was the evidence of divine providence. I mean, or God's introduction to Bnei Yisroel.
Not any more than the actual exodus from Egypt after those 10 plagues.
That's
right?
true, but not since the Bnei Yisrael didn't experience that. It may not have been as
They
clear.
didn't experience what?
The plagues. Only Mitzrayim.
They were there when it was happening. Right? They were there when it was happening. It was no secret.
Better to be a witness.
Yeah.
than,
That's part of why he did it, so that
Than a
everyone would
participant.
see.
than a participant. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chaya?
That's why Hashem did it while the
Yeah.
Jews were still there. Otherwise, he could have done it all when they.
Correct. That's what the pasuk says. In order that you will know, right? They certainly did experience that. Yes. Right.
This kind of idea of validating the sender rather than message, then used in the current computer communication. The three Jewish boys, this RSA code that are used elsewhere was invented by three Jewish boys from MIT, Rosen, Omer, and got the same.
What is the RSA code? Sorry.
We all use in communications.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes you get a token and it gives you RSA code. It's how to verify the sender.
Uh-huh.
Before them, it was in 1973. Before them, they were messages that has to be symmetrical. You need to know how to do encryption, and your receiver need to know the encryption.
Okay.
And if you have the same kind of code, you can communicate secretly.
Uh-huh.
And it's cumbersome, it's not good. And they found a way that, forget about message, if we can verify the sender, and they came up with this idea of big prime numbers that can be deciphered only if you have a code.
So
they did it on
so Egypt was the RSA. It identified God as the sender with a capital S.
Right. And
Nice.
the funny thing that, according to their recollection or whatever they wrote, it happened after Passover dinner.
Ah, okay.
They had more than 4 classes,
Okay.
and then one of them
Eureka.
came with this
They
idea.
recognized the sender.
Next morning they
Nice.
got together and
Nice. Nice. Beautiful.
patented
Beautiful. I want to do number 9, Dov, then I'll give it to you. Okay? Rav Pinchas in Nefesh Shimshon has another layer of understanding this idea of why we're counting up, why we're counting away, counting up and away from the Omer, why we're counting up as opposed to our 10, 9, 8, 7 countdown. And he writes as follows. When a person counts the days toward a certain day, the intervening days have no significance. For instance, a person who's expecting to receive a large gift at the end of 50 days views the days of waiting as 50 days interfering with my receipt of the gift, right? And I'm counting down till my beloved returns. So on one hand, I wish I could go to sleep and wake up 14 days later and he or she is here, right? The intervening days are just interfering. And when a day passes, only 49 days remain that separate one from that gift, right? On the classic, you have the calendar. So you count down the days. When the day finishes, what do? You tear it off. You tear off that number 24 and you crumple it up and you throw it out. You're finished. Now we're down to 23 days. That's what it is. Each day is just interfering. However, we relate to the days of Sfirat HaOmer very, very differently. These days are days of spiritual building. And when a person builds a 10-story building, he counts each story. I've built the first level. I've built the second story, the second level. He doesn't say, I have 9 stories left to build. And you can't build that 10th story until you have built the first 9 floors. Only then can you do that. Similarly, on the days of Sfirat HaOmer, we are building and preparing ourselves for Matan Torah. God will be prepared to give us a Torah right away. But we are simply not ready yet. I mentioned the 49 levels that we need to ascend. And there are those, we have a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, that goes through the 48 ways through which the Torah is nickned, is acquired. And there are those that say you should focus on one of them each day as you build your way up. And it works out, if I remember correctly, that the 33rd one is in terms of respecting one another, right? And that's Lag BaOmer, that's the Tamidei Rabbi Akiva, the students of Rabbi Akiva, right? Who on their level were not doing that properly. So it's meant to be this build up. Therefore, we count the days of preparation and count those spiritual stories, levels that prepare us, those komot that prepare us for Matan Torah.
You said there were 48 of them in the Mishnah?
Yeah.
What do we do?
Rabbi?
That's
Review all of them.
Rabbi?
Yes, Dov.
How many days was it that the people had to prepare for Matan Torah?
49 days.
No. Moshe said 3 days.
Oh, before Har Sinai. There was a heightened level of preparation the last 3 days.
All these days means how messed up we really are.
Okay, that's a thought. Okay, Janet?
So next week, are we gonna go over those kamot and all those sfirot?
I think next week we're going to deal with Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the first of the 10 Aseret Dibrot.
Okay, because we did that once, but it's still not that clear. Because you hear what says in the spiritual stories that prepare us, well, are we on track? I mean, we're already 4 weeks in, and
Yes,
if we need
yes.
a correction,
So,
maybe we should
I
do that.
think every person needs to take off a little time for some self-reflection, some introspection, and to see what are those steps, what are those areas that need a little bit of fine-tuning. What are the areas, and what is a small but meaningful step that I can take?
So,
Okay,
but-
there is the whole Kabbalistic thing of Chesed Shebegvura and etc.
Chesed
But
Gevurah and-
yeah, but I think a little bit more applicable to most of us is to take out some time and do some introspection and say, what are, again, small, meaningful steps that I can take. The big steps, they don't last. They last for as long as maybe a day or two if we're lucky. But it's the small, incremental steps that can build up and in the end make a tremendous difference when it comes to who we are and what we are about. So that's what I would suggest. Yes, Yosef.
Yeah, I have a question. What is the reason of when we forget the counting of the own? Why is that we cannot continue?
Okay.
We forget?
Okay. So, and someone pointed out to me, someone who watched some of the videos, that I should repeat the questions before I respond to a question. So if I don't do that, please remind me to repeat the question. I'm now repeating the question. Yosef asked, why is it that we have this, the laws are that if a person missed one day, then they can no longer continue to count with a bracha, with a blessing. They will continue to count, but without a blessing. Why is that? And that is, well, if you look back to the psukim that we had, right? The pasuk said in source number 5, right? It said, "Usfartan lachem rachat Shabbat." You should count for yourselves the day after the Pesach. We said, "Sheva Shabbatot timimot tiyana," 7 complete weeks, right? So there are 2 opinions. There's one opinion that looks at it and says, "Okay, I've got 49 mitzvot. There's a mitzvah to count on day number 1. That's one mitzvah. Another mitzvah to count on day number 2, and so on through day 49. According to that opinion, if I missed a day, okay. Let's say a person missed putting on tefillin, right? Would we say don't put on tefillin the next day? Of course not. Every day is its own mitzvah. You missed one day, okay, pick it up tomorrow, right? Make sure the next day you do it. So according to that opinion, if you missed one day of counting, okay, you missed. Fair enough. Next day, continue counting. And right, I missed this mitzvah of day number 4. Let me grab mitzvahs of day 5 through 49. But another opinion says no. The mitzvah, there's one mitzvah of counting the 7 weeks. There's one mitzvah with 49 components to that mitzvah. So according to that opinion, right, once you've broken it, if the balloon is popped, then you can know, right, continuing on will be a blessing in vain, a bracha levatala, a blessing in vain, because the mitzvah was to count all 49 days. Once I missed one day, then I can't continue on with the bracha. So what do we say lahalacha? The halacha is as follows. We say if you missed a day in its entirety, continue counting in order to cover the opinion that says each day is its own standalone mitzvah. And a counting is considered a proper counting, even in the absence of making a bracha. So the fact that I don't make a bracha does not negate that I have counted. Therefore, continue counting in order to cover that opinion that says each day is its own standalone mitzvah. And therefore, you miss this day, don't miss subsequent days. However, in order to cover the opinion that says that no, you can't continue counting, you would not make a bracha, because you can't write a blessing is a very serious thing. And we don't want to make a bracha levatala. According to one opinion, that's a blessing that's being made in vain. So as is typically the case, the halacha tries to cover, we have our Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. Now that was written by Rav Yosef Karo, and he was one of the commentators on the Tur Shulchan Aruch. That was an earlier book that went through the same structure, the same halachot, but instead of reaching a conclusion, he'll list this opinion, that opinion, this opinion, that opinion. But he doesn't bring it all together. The Shulchan Aruch comes together and says, okay, well, Shulchan Aruch literally means a Shulchan is a table, Aruch it's set. Let me set the table for you. Let me make it very clear for you. What should you do? Halacha, Jewish law, comes from the root word holech, walk. What's the path what should I do? How am I supposed to walk? Which way do I go? What am I supposed to do? So the halacha will be arranged to cover as many of those opinions as we can. So therefore the halacha covers both of those opinions. According to the one who says, I can continue counting, right? And I get a mitzvah every day that I count, continue counting by all means. And you'll get a mitzvah every day that you count. But according to the opinion that says, yes, but you're not really obligated anymore because it's already a punctured balloon. It was a 49-day balloon. And once there's a hole in one, all the air goes out. Okay. So therefore, in order to not tread upon that opinion, don't make a bracha. And I can say as many times as I want. Today's the 28th day of the Omer. Today's 20. No one will have any issue with that halachically. I'm not uttering a blessing in the context of when a blessing is not called for. Sasha.
But if it's considered to be like one mitzvah, then it's apparently like one bracha at the beginning.
Why do we say 49 brachas?
Okay, good, excellent. So if we're saying that it's one mitzvah, make one bracha and let it go for all 49 days. Good. So let me ask you a question. Right? We have the mitzvah of dalid kosot, of having 4 cups of wine at the Seder. Right? So why do we make 4 different brachot? There's one mitzvah of 4 cups. Why don't we make one bracha? Right? Oh, because there's a hefsek.
There's a hefsek also. So you're saying there's a hefsek from day to day.
There's a hefsek, right? Hefsek is an interruption between the first and the second, and the second and the third, and the third and the fourth of the cups of wine that we drink. Therefore, that necessitates a new bracha, right? Let's say, well, I'm not sure about that, right? So therefore, over here also, right, it is, right, we have a major hefsek interruption of about 24 hours typically between each of our countings, and therefore we do make a bracha on each of those. That's how I would see
So
it.
on Shabbat,
Rabbi?
we have a second cup of wine. but maybe you got up to clear the table or do a little bit. But we don't make us another B'rei Pri Hagafen then.
Right. It's a little bit of a difference of a separation on Pesach than it is on a regular Shabbat meal.
Rabbi,
Yes, Chaya.
so are there not parallels between all of these examples and the 50 days themselves between the path of life? You made an interesting observation about the word halacha being from life path. So if the Torah is basically your human life guide, isn't the counting of the Omer possibly a metaphor for how you go through life? You raise your children. In some cases, you can go back and redo something that you missed along the way. In other cases, you can't.
Yeah.
Okay. The same thing for praying. The same thing, you can.
Yeah.
You go through.
Certainly, it will be a metaphor that we always need to be counting our way up and trying to move forward in a good, positive way. And if we've made some missteps, then we do our very best to correct those and continue moving forward. Yes, I would say that. Yes, Steve.
I was just wondering if we could combine the Kabbalistic idea of all these spherot, these midot that we're trying to improve, with the idea of whether it's one mitzvah or many, meaning do you view the whole thing as you have to get everything right, or do you compartmentalize it? Just work on your chesed, just work on your gvura. In other words, separate out each midah.
Yeah.
Its own
And also, the sphere are 10 that are one. Right? Yeah. Interesting.
I'm sorry, the sphere are what?
Yeah. There's only one God, but we do talk about these different levels of ascent that we can relate to.
So, and it also seems like for both those opinions, you could say that the 7 week complete weeks is the single mitzvah, but since it's a separate sentence until it's after the 7th week, you shall count 50 days. So the counting of the 50 days and the weeks could be
correct, and that's why we count days and we count weeks,
right? But
as part of our counting.
You could say 2 different sentences rather than combining, and therefore, it could be that you could say a bracha for the day count, even if you missed entirely, but you couldn't say a bracha for the week count. Like you could say.
So we view it as one counting, though. We view it as one counting.
But it's 2 different in the Torah. It's 2 different commands.
Yeah. Yes, Doctor.
Yes. Why is it considered a sad period between Pesach and the counting?
Okay.
I was wondering if there's something uplifting coming.
Correct. That's an excellent point that Dr. Ray is bringing up. Right. So this is a time of introspection, a time of excitement, a time of joy as we're getting closer and closer and closer. So yet we have this overlay of Sfirat HaOmer during the counting of the Omer, that we have certain mourning practices, mourning, right? Certain mourning practices. And that is because it was during this time that the students of Rabbi Akiva, 24,000 students, all died because they were not, we're told, the Gemara says, they were not on their level showing the proper honor to one another. Now, it seems a little bit strange, right? We have 3 weeks that we designate as sad days for the destruction of the first temple and the second temple, and yet we have 33 days for the students of Rabbi Akiva, right? Seems very strange. And there are those that explain that the deaths of the student of Rabbi Akiva, that was during the time of Bar Kokhba. Bar Kokhba was leading a revolt against the Romans. This is 60, 70 years after the destruction of the temple. And there was a sense that this was now the Messianic time. And Rabbi Akiva actually thought that Bar Kokhba was the Mashiach, and that he could have been Mashiach had he followed through. In order to be Mashiach, you need to bring back all the Jews need to return to the land of Israel, and the temple must be rebuilt. And here they were on the heels of the destruction of the second temple. Remember, the second temple was built 70 years after the destruction of the first temple. And here they are 60, 70 years after the destruction of the second temple. And here is this powerful Jewish leader that Rabbi Akiva thought was, or at least could be, Mashiach. So we had the military aspect, and we also had the spiritual aspect. We had that Tzva Hashem, we could call it, the army of God. We had the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, and that could have been the combination that we needed of the military and the spiritual, and that could have been the time for Mashiach coming. And their death was a sign that no, now is not yet the time. They were not yet ready. We were not yet ready. And therefore, the same way that we mourn the destruction of the temple, we also mourn that point where it was within our grasp to get beyond all of the tzarot, all of the difficulties that we have endured over the past thousands of years. All of that could have been cut short. All of that could have reached that point, right? And it didn't. And therefore, there are those that explain that that's the aspect that we are mourning. That the 24,000 students are an indication. It's not just their deaths, but it's an indication of what we were on the cusp of, and that we didn't get there. Okay, so that would be that is why we have this overlay of the Avelut, the mourning during these days of Sri. Let's just see our 10th source. Right, works out good for the 10. Rabbi Aryeh Carmel Master Plan, right? And he says that this idea that we've been discussing, that it's meant to be a time of spiritual growth, that also is indicated in the offerings that are brought. The Omer on Pesach was from the barley harvest. And we explained the barley is the first of the 5 grains to ripen. Therefore, we bring from that first, the Reshit we mentioned. At the same time, barley is considered more to be like, right? The offering on Shavuot was of wheat. Barley is mainly food for animals. I mean, I enjoy a good barley soup, right? But, right, wheat is certainly considered a more elevated grain. Wheat is food for human beings. The Torah hints to us that the physical independence by itself, simply the physical independence, exodus from Egypt, still leaves humankind, from the Torah perspective, on the animal level. We need to become uplifted. The counting of the 49 days signifies a 7-fold refining process. Now we know we have a lot of 7s in Judaism. 7 is always the Kedusha, the holiness within the cycle. But when we want to break the bonds of the natural, that's when we go to the 8th. Brit Milah, circumcision, is on day 8. There we are breaking the bonds of the physical and saying, yes, this is the physical body, but we're meant to complete that. We're meant to partner with God in building, creating humankind. And therefore, with all these 7s, the counting of the 49 days signifies a 7-fold refining process and marks our progress to full human status with our acceptance of the Torah at Sinai 7 weeks after the Exodus. So we make our way from the barley and we make our way to the wheat. We need to. I always like to tell the story of these two farmers, these 2 buddies, weren't farmers, right? And they're getting their friends since they're young. They're getting on and on in years, and they realize that our time on this earth is coming to an end. They've always been wondering, discussing what happens afterwards. So they make a pact. Whoever goes first will come visit the other one in a dream and share what it's like on the other side. Well, one of them leaves this world, and the other friend is waiting, and his friend comes to him in a dream. And he says to him, tell me, what's it like? And he said, we eat whenever we want to eat. We sleep whenever we want to sleep. And the guy says, that's the afterlife? That's what it's like? And he says, no, I came back as a cow in Omaha. Okay? Right? So life needs to be more than just eating when we want to eat, even if it's kosher, sleeping when we want to sleep, even if it's right. We need to elevate who we are, our existence, what life is meant to be all about, and that is represented by this trajectory that we go from the Omer barley to the Shtei HaLechem wheat.
To your point, in the 7th week, the 50th day is the 8th day.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. All right. The 50th is breaking all bonds of the 7s. Yes, thank you. I meant to say thank you. Right? So you have 7 7s, and then we go beyond that. Shavuot on day 50, where we've broken the bonds of the 7 7s. Yes. Yes, Lev.
Back to Barkova. Do we have 24,000 Orthodox rabbis now? Because we have the mighty Israel, so the military is taking care. Maybe it's just they're missing.
Do we have the 24,000 tzaddikim that we need? That I don't know. It would seem, yeah.
There's a lot of people in yeshivot.
There are. Yeah.
How many?
We wandered in the desert for 40 days.
I'm sorry?
We wandered in the desert for 40 days.
40 years.
40 years.
Right? And it was 40 days, right? Yeah. It was 40 years in the desert. 40 is also a big Jewish number for transition. That's what we say. There's 40 days of Yitzirat Havlad, where the embryo is forming inside. We had 40 years in the Midbar, right? The Mabul, the flood, right, which changed the world, was 40 days, right? Yeah.
40 saw.
And a mikvah, which brings about the transition for a woman, which like a born again experience, right? That's 40 saw, correct. That's what mem is, and mem happens to be the middle letter of the alphabet. So that's the transitional letter. Yes. Okay. Yes, Cheryl.
So is the thing with Rabbi Akiva's students, was that when they had to dig their own graves?
No, the digging of the. Cheryl asked about the Rabbi Akiva students. Was that where we had the famous story of digging their own graves? That was the generation of the spies in the desert. Yeah.
And then also thinking about he actually converted to Muslim.
No, I think you think about Shabtai Tzvi. Islam was not yet here. That's about 600 years BM.
But he
Before
wanted
Muhammad.
to. Rabbi Akiva was arguing with him because he didn't approve of his military.
I could be. I'm not fully right. Yeah, but no. That was, you think of Shabtai Tzvi was a false messiah who did convert in the end. Yes.
Another reason why we're counting.
Under duress.
Another reason why we're counting. I think the Sephira, combination of Sephira, they're appointed to be on that particular day. So when we do that, we're
drawing down the orot, the lights of that Sephira. Yes.
Could you please repeat your middle statement? It didn't carry.
So each day that we're counting, we're bringing down the orot, the illumination
For that,
for that day. Yeah, I hear that too. Okay, my friends. Yashikoach, everybody.
So that would say then that each Omer day has a little character of the Mishkan or Beit HaMikdash. You know, if God's presence is being brought